Greetings, fellow cultivators. Welcome to Autonova. Remember to like and subscribe to support the journey. Now, let's dive into the next chapter of A Will Eternal. Laughing loudly, the Bai clan patriarch said, "You can be controlled with wood-type power, giant ghost king, and even more so during your decay period. How will you fight back now?" With that, he shot toward the giant ghost king, joined by the patriarchs from the Kai and Chen clans. The look on the giant ghost king's face remained as calm as before. His energy and his cultivation base were being rapidly eaten away by the wood dimension, to the point where he was no longer in the demigod realm. He was now in the diva realm, and in fact, his power was diminishing so rapidly that it would soon be that of the nascent soul stage. And yet, he seemed completely calm, with the same confident smile on his face, as if he were facing nothing more than a group of clowns. Of course, that only made the patriarchs and heavenly marquises even more nervous. Intense rumbling sounds filled the air as the giant ghost king single-handedly took on 3 devas and 6 near-devas. Even as the shocking scene played out up above, the armed forces of the 3 clans, as well as the soldiers of the 6 heavenly marquises' armies, all began to pour into the city. The chief of the Bai clan led the clan elders in a murderous charge toward the moat, joined by many of the Kai clan elders. "The heavens are changing, Bai Hao. You won't escape this tribulation." The clan chief's heart was bursting with anticipation. He had been waiting for this day for a long time, and in fact, couldn't care less about the giant ghost king. His goal was to skin Bai Hao alive. As chaos spread out down below, the patriarchs of the 3 clans, as well as the 6 heavenly marquises, were engaged in fierce combat with the giant ghost king. Unexpectedly, the fighting already seemed to be on the verge of ending. One boom after another rang out, and blood sprayed out of the giant ghost king's mouth. His cultivation base was already down to the nascent soul level, and yet, the same self-confident smile could be seen on his face. In fact, it even seemed to contain a bit of ridicule, as though he were sneering at the fact that no one had seen through to the truth yet. However, it was also obvious that the truth would be revealed soon. It was at that point that, all of a sudden, the giant ghost king's body suddenly flickered, as though it were not corporeal. His hand turned blurry, and then the Bai clan patriarch suddenly shouted, "Something's wrong. He's a clone. Damn it, he's a clone. This isn't the giant ghost king's true self. He's an expendable clone." The other 2 patriarchs began to tremble as looks of complete disbelief spread out across their faces. Impossible. Because of the unique way divine will works among demigod experts, they can't create clones more powerful than the nascent soul stage. Demigod realm clones are an impossibility. How could he possibly have a clone like this? And furthermore, how could we have never realized it over all these years? The 3 diva patriarchs weren't the only ones to be shocked. Duke Deathcrier and Duke Netherworld were also profoundly shaken, and both had expressions of utter disbelief on their faces. The Bai clan patriarch gritted his teeth bitterly as he looked at the giant ghost king. Finally, he understood why he had been so calm this entire time. And now, he realized that everything was exactly as the giant ghost king had described, a game. "So, this is your secret weapon. This is why you were so self-confident." It was a game that the giant ghost king had carefully set up, and was sure he would not lose. The probing for information, the provocation, the compromises, the placations, pretending to be weak, none of them were real. All of it had been a huge game. As everyone reeled in shock, the giant ghost king chuckled. By this point, his body had almost completely faded away. And yet, his laughter still contained a type of supreme and ultimate power that echoed out through heaven and earth. "Now you understand, and yet, it's too late. This has all been nothing more than a game to me. So what if you know about my decay period? And so what if you know about my weakness to wood-type power? My decay period didn't just start right now. In fact, it's almost over. In 3 months, I'll be fully recovered. And that is when I'll return, and we can all reminisce about old times." The giant ghost king shook his head as he looked around scornfully. That look of disdain was like a big palm that slapped all of the rebels directly in the face. "You only have 3 months. Let's see if you can find my true self during that time. That is phase 2 of my little game." He threw his head back and laughed uproariously as he slowly faded out of existence. The 3 diva patriarchs and 6 heavenly marquises were all having trouble breathing steadily, and couldn't keep the terror out of their eyes. As of this point, they had no choice to believe what the giant ghost king had just told them. And they knew that they only had 3 months. If they didn't find the giant ghost king's true self within 3 months, then they and their clans would be exterminated. They could flee, of course. The Wildlands was a big place. But with the giant ghost king at his peak, they would never be able to escape him. Find him, shouted the Bai clan patriarch. Spare nothing. Pour all resources into the search. We must find where the giant ghost king's true self is. He's still in his decay period, so if we find him, we'll live. If we don't find him, we're all dead. He said 3 months, but we can't trust him. 1 month. We have to find him in 1 month. Somehow he managed to do the unexpected and create a clone. To control that clone, his true self would have to be somewhere nearby. I'd say there's an 80 to 90% chance that he's actually in Giant Ghost City. The Bai clan patriarch's heart was already filled with despair. They had been beaten. They had prepared for years and built up power, and yet, had been completely routed. It was almost funny. How could any of them have ever imagined that the giant ghost king would somehow be able to create a demigod clone, which was supposed to be impossible? How could he have a clone like that? Eyes bloodshot, the Chen clan patriarch shouted out similar orders, and even started flying around to search personally. The Kai clan patriarch, as well as the 6 heavenly marquises, were all trembling in fear, but similarly began to carry out searches. They held nothing back, searching everywhere in Giant Ghost City to try to find the giant ghost king's true self. Duke Netherworld was in no mood to fight Duke Deathcrier any longer, and withdrew from the fight. As for Duke Deathcrier, he was not inclined to continue fighting either, and simply hovered there, laughing at the top of his lungs. No one bothered to ask him where the giant ghost king's true self was. Everyone knew that there was no way the giant ghost king would trust information that important to anyone. Time would be better spent searching rather than asking pointless questions. And they were right. Duke Deathcrier hadn't even been aware that the person he had been dealing with for so long was only a clone. As the 3 great clans and the forces of the 6 heavenly marquises began to search Giant Ghost City, Bai Xiaochun was sitting in his cell in Cell Block D in Devil Penitentiary, looking around in boredom at one of his fellow inmates, the old man with the red birthmark who had offended the giant ghost king years ago. Sighing, he said, "Hey old man, I've been in here for a while now, and I've talked to you a whole bunch. Are you ever going to say anything back?" Originally, he had felt like he and this old man could commiserate with each other as fellow sufferers. However, the man had never even looked at him, much less said anything. Eventually, Bai Xiaochun had decided to just ignore him. However, today, the old man actually opened his eyes, and furthermore, his expression had flickered a few times. Curious, Bai Xiaochun asked him a few more questions, only to be ignored. "Don't you know who I am, old man?" Bai Xiaochun yelled. "Listen up, I'm the #1 Dark Inquisitor in Devil Penitentiary. It's not going to do you any good to piss me off." However, the old man simply sat there, frowning and ignoring Bai Xiaochun. Glaring at the humiliation, Bai Xiaochun gave a cold snort and was just about to say something else when the entrance to the cell block opened, and the captain of Squad 9 rushed in, followed by several of the guards who Bai Xiaochun was particularly close to. Alarmed expressions could be seen on their faces as they rushed over. "Something big is happening, Bai Hao," the captain said urgently. "You have to come with us, right away. The 3 great clans are rebelling, and they're being joined by 6 of the heavenly marquises. All of Giant Ghost City is in chaos. The Bai clan isn't going to let you off the hook. You need to get out of here, and that's just what we're going to help you do." With that, the captain grabbed his arm to drag him away. Although Bai Xiaochun had long since reckoned that the 3 great clans would make their move soon, he was still surprised that it was happening so suddenly. But then the captain explained how the giant ghost king's cultivation base had dropped because of his decay period. Except, the giant ghost king everyone had seen was actually a clone, and the 3 great clans were now searching for his true self. All of this information struck Bai Xiaochun deeply with shock. Now he finally understood why the giant ghost king hadn't just wiped out the 3 great clans. It wasn't that he didn't want to, it was that he was in his decay period, and couldn't. That decay period was also why the 3 great clans felt confident enough to launch their rebellion. However, in the end, they fell into the Giant Ghost King's game. "Damn you, Giant Ghost King. If you want to play games, fine, but why did you have to drag me into it?" Depressed, and yet completely helpless about the situation, Bai Xiaochun knew that he was in a dangerous situation. The enraged Bai clan would not just let him go, and therefore, he needed to escape as quickly as possible. Having reached this point in his train of thought, he gratefully clasped the captain on the shoulder. "Brothers," he said, addressing the captain and the guards, "thank you for the immense kindness you've shown. I'll never forget it. Now's not the time for talking, though, I need to get out of here." However, even as he was about to leave, he suddenly heard the voice of the little turtle in his ear. "Hey, y'all little punk, what are you so anxious to leave for? We have a chance to make some money here, are you in? Definitely not, Bai Xiaochun said without the slightest hesitation. He even rolled his eyes. As far as he was concerned, there wasn't anything that could possibly be more important than his poor little life. Outside in the city, the three great clans were going crazy searching for the giant ghost king's true self, which meant that this was a very critical moment for Bai Xiaochun. The chief of the Bai clan would definitely take advantage of the chaos to try to kill him. In a moment like this, Bai Xiaochun was in no mood to think about making money. That was especially true considering it was the little turtle who had suggested it. Over the years, the little turtle had caused one troublesome incident after another, so at the moment, Bai Xiaochun simply ignored him and hurried along with the captain, worried that he might not be able to get out of the prison in time. Everyone in Devil Penitentiary was completely on edge. Guards and prisoners alike were rushing toward the entrance of the cell block. At this point, the little turtle anxiously flew out of Bai Xiaochun's bag of holding and landed on his shoulder. Don't be like that, he transmitted. I'm talking about a lot of money here, the kind of opportunity that only comes around once in a blue moon. It's right here in front of us. Come on, don't leave, ya little punk. Bai Xiaochun looked over at the little turtle and could see that he seemed really anxious. The turtle glanced behind them and then urgently continued to transmit his voice. All right, listen punk, I know where the giant ghost king's true self is. Originally, the little turtle had planned to use a different tactic to try to attract Bai Xiaochun's attention. However, considering that Bai Xiaochun was clearly intent on leaving, he felt he didn't have any other choice than to tell the truth. Furthermore, he was sure that this new revelation would provoke a response. And he was right. This time, Bai Xiaochun's reaction was more in line with what the turtle had expected. A tremor ran through him, and his eyes went wide as he said, "What?" This turn of events was too sudden. The three great clans were turning the city upside down to look for the giant ghost king's true self, and yet the little turtle actually knew where he was. Despite his shock, though, Bai Xiaochun continued to head toward the entrance of the cell block. What does that have to do with me? He transmitted back. You listen here, little turtle, the most important thing right now is my poor little life. You got that? As far as Bai Xiaochun was concerned, getting involved in this matter between the giant ghost king and the three great clans would be far too dangerous. What are you doing? The little turtle replied anxiously. Listen to me, ya little punk. Slow down. Fine. Listen, Bai Xiaochun. You know the old guy in the cell right across from you, with the red birthmark on his face? That's the giant ghost king's true self. Bai Xiaochun's mind reeled in shock, and he even gasped. A look of complete and utter incredulity appeared on his face. He's the giant ghost king? Even his aura was destabilized a bit. This bit of information from the little turtle was completely shocking. All of a sudden, the thought back to what that old man with the red birthmark on his face looked like. Furthermore, Lord Turtle can tell that Giant Ghost King is in the middle of a decay period. In other words, he's weaker now than ever before. The chance to clean out a demigod expert is the kind of thing that only comes along once in 10,000 years. Think about it, punk. A demigod expert. He's the Giant Ghost King. A demigod king. How much treasure do you think he has? If we clean him out, we'll be ultra rich. This opportunity. Heavens. I've only come across chances like this a couple times in my entire life. Why you can't really be planning to just run away? By this point, the little turtle was so anxious his voice was transmitted in the form of a shout. Fearful of losing the opportunity, he had actually revealed everything he knew. Sensing that Bai Xiaochun's interest was piqued, the little turtle's excitement began to grow. He's the Giant Ghost King, little punk, he gushed. We can clean him out. Clean him out. Clean him out. How is that even possible? Bai Xiaochun thought, stopping in place, his heart beginning to race. The captain and the other guards looked back in shock, various expressions flashing across their faces. What's wrong, Bai Hao? The captain said anxiously. Hurry up, let's go. Wait just one moment, Bai Xiaochun said. Feeling very conflicted, he transmitted a question to the little turtle. Are you sure? The little turtle was trembling with indescribable excitement, and also trying to look as impressive and incredible as possible as he replied, Of course I'm sure. I've been keeping my eye on the Giant Ghost King from the first time I saw him. Why do you think I woke up back then anyway? I could tell what was going on as soon as I saw him, and was just waiting until his decay period hit. Ha ha ha, this is the moment I've been waiting for. At the most, he's at core formation right now. Listen, there's nothing to worry about. The Giant Ghost King is a crafty fellow. Nobody would ever possibly think that he would actually be hiding as a prisoner in this place. It's just too bad that he ran into Lord Turtle. Bai Xiaochun thought back to what the little turtle had said back when he woke up. that the giant ghost king smelled like treasure. This little turtle, Bai Xiaochun thought, his heart beginning to race even faster, and his eyes beginning to shine. If he had really found the giant ghost king's true self, and the man was currently weak, then just as the little turtle had said, it would be an incredible opportunity. The benefits of cleaning him out would be difficult to even describe. In fact, it could also be a secret weapon to cause some problems for the three great clans. Of course, whether it was simply robbing him, or using his status in a clever way, both would be very dangerous. Even when Bai Xiaochun got very excited, he wouldn't lose his sense of reason. Hesitating, he said, the giant ghost king is a demigod. Even though he's hiding here, he definitely would have some trump cards prepared to defend himself just in case. Don't worry, his trump card is none other than the invisible spell formation in the stone turtle that contains Devil Penitentiary. Once that spell formation is activated, it will be almost as strong as the demigod realm. Devas would be able to break through it, but not right away. Unfortunately for the giant ghost king, he was just unlucky enough to run into Lord Turtle. Ha ha ha, I wouldn't dare to speak about any other spell formation, but this is a turtle spell formation. Lord Turtle can't control it, but I can nullify its effects, at least temporarily. In fact, I already did. Come on, let's clean him out. We'll definitely succeed. He's a demigod, he definitely has a bunch of treasure on him. The little turtle's eyes were shining with unprecedented excitement, and he was shaking visibly. Will he have a diva soul? Bai Xiaochun said, his eyes bloodshot. The fact that a demigod king was right there waiting to be grabbed caused even him to start to go a bit crazy. Of course, the little turtle screeched. To you, diva souls are priceless, but demigods can get them without even trying. Hurry up, let's just grab him and get out of the turtle statue. I can only keep the spell formation suppressed for so long. Once my control slips and the giant ghost king is able to control it again, we'll be in great danger. Bai Xiaochun took a deep breath and looked over at the captain and other guards, who were anxiously waiting for him to speak. Gritting his teeth, he said, Captain, you go on ahead. But please give me the key to the cells. There's a guy back there who pissed me off, and I want to teach him a lesson before I leave. With that, Bai Xiaochun clasped hands and bowed deeply. At any other time, the captain would never have been able to agree to this request. But considering everyone was completely on edge, he looked at Bai Xiaochun for a moment, and then sighed and said, All right, brother Bai Hao, you're on your own now. We'll take off now. Naturally, the captain could tell that Bai Hao had some secret he wasn't willing to divulge. However, that didn't matter. Even if Bai Hao wanted to kill one of the prisoners, it wouldn't matter in the end. The captain tossed a command medallion over to him, then turned and left with the other guards. Bai Xiaochun grabbed the command medallion that acted as the key to the cells, then adjusted his aura and settled his thoughts. He knew that if he slipped up in the slightest way right now, he could get into a lot of trouble. But his decision was made. Gritting his teeth, he began to speed toward the cell that contained the old man with the red birthmark on his face. Along the way, he had a short transmitted conversation with the little turtle to confirm that the old man was in the core formation stage. However, he was still feeling nervous. Although the little turtle didn't notice, he looked up in thought for a moment. Then he lowered his voice and said, No, little turtle, it's too dangerous. He's a demigod. If you're wrong about everything, nothing will happen to you. You could escape anytime you wanted. But I would lose my poor little life. You fly over into my hand. That way, if the situation gets dangerous, we can face it together. If we're going to clean out a demigod together, you need to show some good faith. The little turtle was completely wrapped up in the idea of getting some treasure. On top of that, the giant ghost king's true self was just up ahead. Therefore, in response to Bai Xiaochun's words, he immediately flew out and allowed Bai Xiaochun to grab him. Hurry up, the little turtle rebuked anxiously. What's with all the delays? Fudge, the chance to clean out a demigod is a good thing. Why are you hesitating? Rewards come only with risk. Without taking chances, how can you ever profit? Chuckling inwardly, Bai Xiaochun kept his tone sincere as he said, I'm just young and don't have any experience in this kind of thing. My apologies, Lord Turtle. Please don't take any offense, sir. With that, he headed toward the cell that contained the giant ghost king's true self. This was the first time the little turtle had ever heard Bai Xiaochun speak so politely to him, and it felt wonderful. Very proud of himself, he decided that he should take some time to educate Bai Xiaochun a bit more in the future, to prove how wise, intelligent, and courageous he himself was. Even as the little turtle reveled in his own pride, Bai Xiaochun flew closer to the giant ghost king's cell. Inside was the old man with the red birthmark, who slowly looked up, his eyes shining with a sharp light and a bit of disdain. It was the type of look that someone might give to a bug. However, before the old man could say anything, Bai Xiaochun pulled out his command medallion and unlocked the door of the skull cell. Then, before the little turtle could do anything, Bai Xiaochun shouted, "See if you can handle my secret attack, you old bastard." At the same time, he took the pleased little turtle and hurled him with lightning-like speed toward the old man in the cage. He did everything with incredible smoothness, force, and speed. As soon as the little turtle left his hand, he slammed the cell door shut and then became a series of afterimages that shot backward away from the cage. He stopped some distance away, looking back at the cage and preparing to flee at a moment's notice. "Don't blame me, little turtle," he said, feeling completely in the right. "You're eternally indestructible, but I'm not. Why you little punk." The little turtle had been completely taken by surprise. Never could he have possibly imagined that Bai Xiaochun would be treacherous enough to do this. "Ugh, you little jerk. You're completely shameless, despicable, contemptible." However, there was nothing the little turtle could do at the moment. Enraged, he turned toward the frowning giant ghost king, and then flew forward at top speed. "How impudent," the giant ghost king yelled, waving his hand out in front of him. A boom rang out as the little turtle slammed into an invisible barrier roughly 3 meters in front of him. However, that only seemed to make him angrier. Looking at the giant ghost king, he shouted, "You think nobody would figure out you were hiding here, giant ghost king? You might be able to trick everybody else, but you can't fool Lord Turtle. Hand over your treasures this instant, otherwise Lord Turtle is going to beat you to death." With that, he shot forward, again slamming into the invisible barrier, this time causing cracks to spread out in the air. In response to the little turtle's words, the giant ghost king's expression flickered with shock and disbelief, which went to prove that he really was the giant ghost king. "Who are you?" he asked. He had been a prisoner in this cell for 200 years, and was also protected by the stone turtle spell formation. Because of that, he had assumed that he was safe, but now, his identity was exposed. How could he not be shocked? However, it was only a moment later that his killing intent erupted. As the little turtle closed in, he reached out and waved his right index finger. Spell formation. Evaporating destruction. As soon as the words left his mouth, the stone turtle vibrated, and an indescribable power stirred. Apparently, the single wave of a finger on the part of the giant ghost king would unleash an all-destructive divine ability. Bai Xiaochun was shaken by this development, and yet, before anything else could happen, the little turtle's eyes widened into a glare. Sticking his head far out from his shell, he roared, "No destruction." Instantly, the air of extermination which had appeared moments ago faded away into nothing. The giant ghost king's eyes bulged with disbelief, and before he could do anything else, the little turtle shot forward and slammed into his chest. The giant ghost king let out a muffled grunt, his face turning ashen as he staggered backward a few steps, his heart raging with astonishment. "Impossible. This is impossible. Be destroyed." Trembling, he yet again waved his finger at the little turtle. However, the stone turtle's spell formation didn't do anything in response. The blood immediately drained from the giant ghost king's face. As of this moment, his heart was racing more wildly than it had in countless years. At the same time, a sensation of profound danger filled him. What was happening right now was vastly more critical and astonishing than the rebellion of the 3 great clans. "Destroy what, your ass?" The little turtle threw his head back and laughed uproariously, then launched himself forward in another attack. Outside the cell, Bai Xiaochun had been paying close attention to what was happening, and by now, his eyes were shining. Throwing his head back, he laughed loudly at the realization that this really was the giant ghost king. Clearly, his cultivation base really was at the core formation level, and furthermore, he couldn't use the spell formation. The fact that he was like a sick tiger with no teeth or claws left Bai Xiaochun feeling very relieved. Laughing, he walked forward, and then entered the cage again. The majestic, illustrious giant ghost king is actually dressed up like a prisoner and hiding in this place. "How low of you, giant ghost king." Sticking his chin up, he assumed his best pose and then waved his sleeve proudly. With the snap of a finger, I, Bai Hao, reduced the giant ghost king to the point of becoming ashes. Ha ha ha. Even as Bai Xiaochun's laughter rang out, the giant ghost king stood there feeling shocked and anxious. However, the look in his eye was cold and sinister. After all, he was a demigod king, and knew how to maintain his dignity. "Bai Hao," he began, however, before he could finish speaking, Bai Hao took a step forward and slapped him across the side of the head. Instantly, the giant ghost king's cultivation base was sealed. Off to the side, the little turtle let out a whoop of delight. Clean him out, A tremor ran through the giant ghost king, who was now glaring at Bai Xiaochun with intense killing intent. Despite that killing intent, Bai Xiaochun simply walked forward and began to search him. A moment later, he pulled out a ring of holding. Unfortunately, further searching didn't reveal anything else. Only one ring of holding? He said, less than pleased. That's it? As for the giant ghost king, the humiliation he was enduring had his heart pulsing with rage that simply couldn't be described with words. As far as he was concerned, this Bai Hao was nothing more than a pawn in his game, something to make the action a bit more interesting. He should be the type of person he could kill with a thought if necessary. Never in his wildest dreams could he have imagined that this pawn would end up holding his own life in his hands. This sudden turn of events, and the sudden crisis, was something that the giant ghost king couldn't simply accept. He was a demigod, and he had planned this entire event down to the smallest detail. However, even as he seemed to sink into a cool calm, the little turtle shouted, "Searching for treasures isn't your forte, ya little punk." With that, he flew forward and began searching the giant ghost king's robes and tossing all sorts of items out toward Bai Xiaochun. There was a long, crimson spear, a blue jade slip, a multicolored magic bottle, and also a fist-sized chunk of black rock. When the giant ghost king saw all of these things flying out, his expression flickered, and soon turned extremely unsightly. Those items had been hidden in various spatial pockets he had created, which no one should ever have been able to find. However, the little turtle easily found them and emptied them. "You," the giant ghost king said anxiously, his eyes bulging. Although there weren't many items, each one was the type that could shake heaven and earth. That red spear was how he had earned his name to begin with, and could not be wielded by anyone under the Diva realm. It had been forged with an object that fell from beyond the heavens, and contained 1 billion restrictive spells. Even among devas, it could be considered a top-rate item. Then there was the blue jade slip. It looked ordinary in nature, but contained a legacy Dao of incredible importance. As for the magic bottle, it was called the Primeval Cosmos Bottle, and was similarly something that could not be used by anyone under the level of a diva. It could absorb any and all objects in creation and transform them into high-level medicine. He had paid a huge price to acquire this item, and was relatively certain that it was why the Nine Serenities King had gotten involved in the rebellion. Finally, there was the black rock. It was a completely unique item in the world that not even the giant ghost king was sure of the origins of. Supposedly, it had once belonged to the first-generation Arch-Emperor, although no one knew where he had acquired it. These items were his most valuable treasures, so seeing them being taken away by the little turtle filled the giant ghost king's heart with uncontrollable anxiety. Bai Xiaochun was ecstatic to see so many things being pulled out. Although he wasn't sure how to use any of them, and despite the fact that they all were branded personally to the giant ghost king, he could tell that they were extraordinary. Anything the giant ghost king kept hidden on his person should definitely be incredibly precious. "Maybe I can't use them now, but I'll be able to eventually." Bai Xiaochun did his best to hide his pleasure, but as for the little turtle, it was with immense pride that he looked disdainfully at the giant ghost king and said, "Think you can hide your stuff from Lord Turtle? Dream on." The giant ghost king fought to keep himself under control. He knew that at the moment, his rage could do nothing to resolve the situation, and that despite how his heart was dripping with blood, he needed to force himself to remain calm. "What do you want?" he said, uttering his words one at a time. Although his cultivation base was currently very weak, and he couldn't even control his own life or death, he still managed to radiate calmness, and was even somewhat threatening. When Bai Xiaochun saw that, he couldn't help but shiver a bit. After all, this was a demigod, even though his cultivation base was currently not at that level. However, the fact that he felt scared also got him angry. "Trying to frighten me?" he said. Then he thought about how the giant ghost king had been using him as a pawn in his game, and had even turned him into a prisoner. Influenced a bit by the little turtle, his eyes suddenly shone with disdain, and he smacked the giant ghost king across the side of the head again. "Close your eyes when you talk to me," he said angrily. The sight of the giant ghost king so angry that he was physically shaking was actually quite exciting. Licking his lips, he continued, "I've never smacked a demigod. So exciting." In fact, he couldn't hold back from delivering another smack. "Not gonna follow orders, huh? Heh. I said close your eyes when you talk to me. Do you have a death wish, Bai Hao?" The giant ghost king raged angrily. If his cultivation base was at its normal level, he would teach Bai Xiaochun a long and hard lesson about the consequences of slapping people. Bai Xiaochun was quite excited by the thrill of the moment, so in response to the giant ghost king's threatening words, he angrily yelled, "Still trying to threaten me? How dare you? Don't push me." I'm the #1 Dark Inquisitor in Devil Penitentiary. When I get pissed off, I frighten even myself. Then he placed his hand onto his bag of holding and considered whether or not to take out an aphrodisiac pill. When the giant ghost king saw the rage in Bai Xiaochun's eyes, he was shocked. Then he remembered hearing that Bai Xiaochun was a Dark Inquisitor, and soon, hatred began to build up in his heart. He was a majestic demigod expert, the illustrious giant ghost king. The fact that a small fry like this was threatening to torment him caused him to grit his teeth in anger. However, he still managed to calm down. What do you want, Bai Hao? Just tell me. Spit it out. Don't tell me that your betrayal of the Bai clan was some elaborate plot. The giant ghost king was able to control his anger so well that his voice actually didn't contain anything threatening in it all. As he spoke, he also couldn't help but glance at Bai Xiaochun's palm, and wonder if he was going to get slapped again. Plot my ass. You listen up, giant ghost king. Lord Bai wants, however, before he could finish his sentence, cell block D suddenly trembled, and then the entrance shook violently, almost as if someone was trying to break it open. Bai Xiaochun's face fell as he looked over at the entrance. Another huge boom echoed out, and the entrance collapsed, revealing numerous figures who began to fly in. Then, a shout of rage erupted out, the type of which that contained unsurpassable animosity. Bai Hao, the time has come for you to die. It was none other than the chief of the Bai clan, flanked by numerous other cultivators from the direct bloodline. Even as Bai Xiaochun's face fell, the little turtle transmitted a message. Let's take the loot and run. They showed up sooner than expected, and Lord Turtle can't fully control the spell formation. Bai Xiaochun took a deep breath to restore his calm. His eyes flashed with icy light as he unhesitatingly grabbed the giant ghost king by the neck, then turned to flee. Give me the command medallion, little punk, the little turtle shouted. Fudge. I can't believe these people dare to interrupt our holy shakedown. Lord Turtle will open all the cells, that will completely screw them over. No way. Bai Xiaochun replied. If you open all the cells and free the prisoners, they won't just start fighting the Bai clan, they'll come after me. After all, as a Dark Inquisitor, Bai Xiaochun had interrogated many of the prisoners in the cells, most of whom now hated him with deep passion. The little turtle was too stunned at Bai Xiaochun's response to say anything. Meanwhile, Bai Xiaochun shook his head and began to move forward, keeping the giant ghost king gripped in his hand. If I can't hide, then I might as well fight. Bai Xiaochun shouted, and afterimages appeared as he summoned his 4 clones. At the same time, he pulled out all sorts of magical items, many of which had 14-fold spirit enhancements. Coupled with the power of his cultivation base, it made his energy surge to a shocking level. As the rumbling sounds echoed out, the distant members of the Bai clan saw Bai Xiaochun. The clan chief's eyes turned bright red, and he bellowed with rage. Flanking him were 5 clan elders, all of them in the nascent soul stage, as well as a crowd of core formation experts. Time to die, Bai Hao, he shouted, immediately accelerating toward Bai Xiaochun. Bai Xiaochun knew that this was a moment of deadly crisis, and that he couldn't afford to get involved in a protracted fight. Therefore, he pushed forward at top speed, using his frigid chi and mountain-shaking bash to achieve shocking speed. The little turtle also knew that it was a dangerous moment. Whooping with excitement, he tucked his head back into his shell to go along for the ride. In the blink of an eye, Bai Xiaochun reached the forces from the Bai clan. The divine abilities launched by the clan elders were handled by his 4 clones. At the same time, Bai Xiaochun's true self slammed into one of the early nascent soul stage elders, sending him tumbling backward several dozen meters. Instead of stopping, Bai Xiaochun continued forward. His 4 clones attacked another of the nearby clan elders, unleashing all sorts of divine abilities. Meanwhile, he used the throat-crushing grasp to crush the neck of one of the incoming cultivators. In the time it takes a spark to fly off of a piece of flint, the fiercest of fighting had broken out. Booms and shockwaves spread out in all directions, casting the entire area into chaos. Scintillating light shone out from Bai Xiaochun as he pulled out his transformed eternal parasol and stabbed it into the chest of a nearby enemy. It was a Bai clan core formation cultivator, but it only took a moment for his muscular frame to be withered away, his life force sucked out of him with shocking speed. As Bai Xiaochun continued his shocking charge, golden designs flared up all over him that were impossible to conceal from the surrounding cultivators. He also threw out a 14-colored flame, which transformed into a sea of fire that burned anything it touched. As of this moment, Bai Xiaochun was like a celestial warrior, proceeding forward with shocking momentum. The fighting had only been going on for a moment, and had been matchlessly bitter. Bai Xiaochun's hair was in disarray, but he didn't slow down in the slightest. A single fist strike sent the clan chief tumbling away, and caused other clan members to scatter. When he and his 4 clones all fought with full strength, they could crush anything in their path as easily as dried weeds. Although they seemed to be acting with practiced ease, they were actually in great danger. 2 of Bai Xiaochun's clones had already been nearly destroyed by some of the clan elders, and were forced to transform into motes of light that flew back into Bai Xiaochun. Blood oozed out of the corner of his true self's mouth, and yet, he didn't slow in the slightest as he barreled toward the exit. It was a shocking sight for all the prisoners to behold, as well as the surrounding Bai clan cultivators. The power and ferocity on display by Bai Xiaochun was hard to take in. However, even more shocking was the outrageous nature of his equipment. Heavens! That magical item has a 14-fold spirit enhancement. This Bai Hao is crazy. Even that leather armor of his has a 14-fold spirit enhancement. He's a genius. A spirit-enhancing genius. You're not getting away, raged the clan chief, using a minor teleportation to close the distance between himself and Bai Xiaochun. The clan elders similarly gave chase. Bai Xiaochun was starting to get anxious. On the one hand, he was trying to break through the enemy to escape, but on the other hand, he had to make sure that the giant Ghost King didn't get killed. As far as Bai Xiaochun was concerned, the giant Ghost King was like a diva soul to him, so he couldn't let him die. However, to do both of those things at the same time was very difficult. In fact, it was actually impossible to shield the giant Ghost King from all of the attacks being thrown their way. And yet, the giant Ghost King didn't say a single word the entire time. The truth was that he was actually impressed by Bai Xiaochun's bravery and ferocity. His veins of steel were on full display, to the point where he seemed like a completely different person. Despite the fact that the giant Ghost King wasn't saying anything, Bai Xiaochun found it strange that he was keeping silent. Furthermore, the attacks which found their way to him did nothing more than cause his face to turn a bit pale. He hadn't even coughed up any blood yet, and was clearly not injured in any way. This giant Ghost King is a demigod expert. Don't tell me he's got some trick up his sleeve? Bai Xiaochun was stunned, but didn't have time to think about the matter. 4 Bai clan elders had just teleported in range, and were unleashing a divine ability, a black cloud filled with screaming, evil ghosts. Eyes bloodshot, Bai Xiaochun's jaw dropped, and he opened up the eternal parasol, causing dazzling light to flash out and block the evil ghosts. At that point, the little turtle shot out toward the Bai clan elders. However, one of the 4 elders performed an incantation gesture with his right hand, summoning the image of a palm which shot toward Bai Xiaochun. Without even thinking about it, Bai Xiaochun reflexively shoved the giant Ghost King out in front of him to defend himself. Rumbling sounds could be heard as the enormous palm fell to pieces, and Bai Xiaochun staggered backward. As for the giant Ghost King, he felt like cursing, but instead, gritted his teeth and endured the pain. Not hurt? Bai Xiaochun muttered in surprise. The Bai clan elder was similarly shocked. He had noticed that Bai Xiaochun was dragging an old man with him, but hadn't paid it much attention. But now, he realized that this old man was clearly extraordinary. A nascent soul-level attack which would have injured Bai Xiaochun didn't faze the old man at all. In fact, he didn't even cough up any blood. Ecstatic, Bai Xiaochun hefted his eternal parasol in one hand and the giant Ghost King in the other, and then charged forward again. As of this moment, the giant Ghost King was a human shield which Bai Xiaochun could use to block any of the divine abilities being sent his way. The cultivators from the Bai clan were all shocked. Eventually, the giant Ghost King couldn't take it any longer. He was trembling, and his ashen face was now turning livid with rage. He had just sustained 10 nascent soul-level attacks, all backed with deadly intent. Unable to hold back his humiliation at being treated like a human shield, he began to curse. Bai Hao, you little bastard, I hope you die a painful death. You'll get your comeuppance one of these days. If I can't kill you myself, then my daughter will make mincemeat out of you. Although the giant Ghost King was enraged, he was a demigod and a king, he actually wasn't very proficient in cursing people. Therefore, he could only come up with some basic taunts, which he repeated using different variations. Bai Xiaochun cleared his throat proudly and completely ignored the curses. In fact, he even considered looking for a chance to get the little turtle to teach the giant Ghost King a thing or two about insults. Even as that thought crossed his mind, he proceeded forward, not only using the giant Ghost King as a shield, but fighting back with him. His actions, coupled with his shocking 14-fold spirit-enhanced treasures, ensured that he was already getting close to the entrance of Cell Block D. Although everyone in the Bai clan burned with unquenchable rage, they simply couldn't kill Bai Xiaochun. Not only was he incredibly tough to begin with, he also had 4 clones to help him, and tons of eye-catching magical items. There was his strange parasol which could suck away life force and replenish him, and also the fact that he could move with shocking speed. His fleshly body power was incredible, and he could teleport, making it completely impossible to kill him in any short amount of time. The old man with the red birthmark on his face was an even deeper mystery to the Bai clan cultivators. No matter how many times he got hit, even with powerful magical items, he didn't even cough up a single mouthful of blood. In turn, Bai Xiaochun was bashing his way closer and closer to the entrance. The clan elders were starting to get very nervous, and even joined together in an attack that caused intense rumbling sounds to fill the cell block. Powerful fluctuations rolled out, and multicolored light spread out in all directions. However, Bai Xiaochun continued to use the giant Ghost King, who never stopped cursing the entire time. You will die in pain, Bai Hao. You'll get what you deserve one of these days. The giant Ghost King wanted to cry, but no tears would come. His hair was in complete disarray, and his clothes were in tatters. He now possessed none of the dignity of a demigod expert, and it was even possible to see welts and bruises on his skin. Because this was his true self, and he was a demigod, his body wasn't necessarily eternally indestructible, but was strong enough to be very difficult to kill in circumstances like this. With the exception of devas, any opponent he faced couldn't hurt him any more than the bite of a mosquito. Only by wearing him down for a very long time could they possibly kill him. The rage burning in his heart right now was so hot that not even the waters of the underworld river could extinguish it. There was also no small amount of grief inside him. Despite the many years he had lived, and his overall tenacity, he really felt like crying. By this point, he felt like he was being struck by 8 generations of accumulated bad luck. It was simply impossible to describe how humiliated he felt to have run into this damnable Bai Hao. Then he thought back to his original plan, and how he was only supposed to remain in Devil Penitentiary for a few more days before emerging like a cicada shedding its carapace, his decay period completely behind him. Even if the 3 great clans found him before the process was complete, with the spell formation of the stone turtle, they would have been incapable of defeating him. Because of all that, he had looked down with contempt on the 3 great clans the entire time, and had looked forward to watching their terror mount as time passed. From beginning to end, everything was to have been within his control. His anticipation and confidence were so great, in fact, that he hadn't even mentioned the current situation to his daughter in the imperial city. It had been many, many years since he had gotten to do anything interesting, and as such, he had truly been looking forward to playing this little game. However, never could he have possibly imagined that his game would end up like this. It shouldn't be happening this way, he thought miserably. Regret gripped his heart. He had planned everything meticulously and prepared perfectly. Never could he possibly have guessed that things would happen in this way, that one of the pawns in his game would ruin everything. He could only watch as he was thrown this way and that to block various divine abilities and magical items. Booms filled his ears, and his heart sank further into lamentation. I refuse to accept this. He moaned inwardly, his eyes bloodshot. However, there was nothing he could do now. He had secretly tried to make contact with the spell formation, but there had been no reaction, causing his despair to deepen. As the giant Ghost King wallowed in hopelessness, Bai Xiaochun coughed up a huge mouthful of blood. His remaining 2 clones had been destroyed, and were now speeding back to him in the form of 2 motes of light. Although his fleshly body was powerful, his injuries were serious. And yet, he still managed to break through everything the Bai clan was throwing at him. Then, in a blinding flash, he, the little turtle, and the giant Ghost King all burst out through the main door of the cell block. Roars of rage echoed out behind him. Obviously, the clan chief and clan elders weren't going to just give up. They wouldn't rest until Bai Xiaochun was dead. Maybe you can escape from this place, the clan chief howled, but the 3 great clans control Giant Ghost City now. You won't get out of the city. By this point, Bai Xiaochun was speeding toward the exit of Devil Penitentiary. Moments later, the clan chief and clan elders appeared behind him and gave chase. Bai Xiaochun's heart was pounding, and his aura was in chaos. However, what worried him wasn't his injuries, which were significant, but rather, the fact that he needed to get out of the prison as quickly as possible. If he didn't, then eventually the little turtle would lose control of the spell formation. And when that happened, the first thing the giant Ghost King would do would be to kill him. At the moment, the giant Ghost King's eyes were closed, making it obvious that he must be trying to make contact with the stone turtle's spell formation. More nervous than ever, Bai Xiaochun suddenly slapped him again. I'm warning you, he yelled viciously. You better not force me to tell them who you are. The giant ghost king's eyes snapped open and he glared at Bai Xiaochun, panting so hard he felt like his chest was about to explode. However, he had to continue to endure. At the moment, he had no other options available. Bai Xiaochun whizzed along. Thankfully, he was very familiar with Devil Penitentiary, so he quickly made his way through the various tunnels until he was at the exit. Just before leaving, though, the little turtle's face fell. "I'm gonna lose control," he shouted. A tremor ran through the giant ghost king, and his eyes began to shine with intense light. He could sense that the spell formation was beginning to awaken, and in fact, the entire stone turtle was beginning to vibrate. Further back, the clan chief and clan elders' faces all fell. As for the giant ghost king, his excitement grew, and he was just preparing to reach out to the spell formation when, all of a sudden, Bai Xiaochun, aware that he couldn't easily slap the man unconscious, suddenly reached into his bag of holding and produced a handful of aphrodisiac pills. Even as joy spread out across the giant ghost king's face, Bai Xiaochun stuffed the pills into his mouth. There was nothing the giant ghost king could do to fight back. As soon as the pills entered his mouth, they melted, and the medicinal effect of the pills erupted explosively. At the moment, the giant ghost king's cultivation base was incredibly weak, and he couldn't do anything to control the effect of the pills. Rumbling sounds filled his mind, and he instantly lost contact with the spell formation. Although he wanted to re-establish contact, the burning heat that spread through his body battered at his mind, making it difficult to even think straight. However, he made a mad effort to control himself, and once again reached out to the spell formation. The stone turtle instantly surged with power, causing pressure to weigh down everywhere, and filling the hearts of the Bai clan cultivators with sensations of imminent deadly crisis. However, Bai Xiaochun's aphrodisiac pills were simply too devastating, and the giant ghost king had been given too many. Soon his face began to turn bright red, and he started shaking visibly. A moment passed, and, despite the fact that his connection to the spell formation was tenuous at best, it had not been broken. But all Bai Xiaochun had needed was a bit of time. Howling, he pushed forward with greater speed, using everything at his disposal to shoot out of the stone turtle's left eye and then into the moat beyond. In that instant, the giant ghost king called upon his indescribable levels of self-control to suppress the burning fire within him. He gripped tight on his connection to the spell formation, and then tried to activate it. However, as soon as Bai Xiaochun burst out of the turtle's eye, the rising energy of the spell formation faded away. "No!" The giant ghost king howled as he watched hope vanish right in front of him, sending him plummeting into the depths of despair. As soon as the word left his mouth, Bai Xiaochun looked over angrily and slapped him across the side of the head again. "Shut up, I'm gonna kill you, Bai Hao," the giant ghost king roared. "Kill you, ya hear? You're dead." Ag, whack. Bai Xiaochun slapped him again. "Don't hit me, you," whack, 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 whack. Bai Xiaochun proceeded to slap him 8 more times, until finally, some blood oozed out of the giant ghost king's mouth. Having no choice but to endure the humiliation, the giant ghost king bit down on his bottom lip and stopped talking. The current Bai Xiaochun seemed even more terrifying than the Bai Xiaochun who had just fought his way out of the cell block. As of this moment, he seemed like nothing more than a devilish ghost. Thus, this episode comes to an end. Remember to like and comment so we can discuss the story together. Until we meet again in the next chapters.